Welcome back to another episode of Buying Sandlot. I'm Kyle Pagan, as always, joined by Kyle Scott. Today, Unrivaled announced Ripken Nationals will be played at Cooperstown All-Star Village. FlexWork buys a competitor, and we get into more from the weekend. But before we get into the show, Kyle, I think this is probably the greatest premium community plug we could get. Our friends over at the investment group Stout, I don't know if you saw this, they published a report of 400 investors and operators. You know what they said? Said capital has arrived in youth sports, but the ability to deploy it profitably has not.
Summit sponsor, Stout, I would add. I think they did our VIP room.
You got that right?
Yeah, so it is. Very short order here. Some of it's already available, but our facilities, companies, and deals databases will be fully live sometime in July. All right, so we got the reports, we got the survey data, but the big unlock for me is having dynamically updated databases that people in the premium community can access on an ongoing basis. What facilities are out there, what companies, what they're doing, what the latest deals are, things like that. And I think that it doesn't exist in a centralized place today that I could find. And it's very hard to do that as a third party just using AI, because I don't say a lot, but a meaningful amount of the information is something we're covering. And a lot of times the lead thing in our newsletter, we're the initial source of it, right? I mean, we're the ones, kind of breaking the news, so to speak. So we're ahead on some of that stuff. So A, I would say rebuying Sandlot if you don't know how to deploy money in youth sports. But B, check out our databases that will be available to premium members soon. The facilities database is live, but it's updated as of the end of May. That and the deals tracker and the companies tracker will be a dynamically updating every 24 hours thing as we cover stuff and as stuff happens in spreadsheet document form, fully searchable.
Do you want to find some money to deploy profitably? I say you check out the Buying Sandlot premium community is all I say. Before we get into the show, we also want to thank Blackmagic Design Cameras for sponsoring it. Whether you are a sports facility, club, school, or coach, Blackmagic Design allows high-quality, affordable, and easy-to-learn multi-camera streaming and filming. Check out their studio cameras, production switchers, DaVinci Resolve, editing and replay tools, and the Blackmagic Camera app on iPhone and Android. For more information, please go to blackmagicdesign.com. All right, Kyle. Good newsletter today. Shout out to you and James. Unrivaled and Dick's continue their partnership with Ripken Nationals and Game Changer as the anchors. From the press release, 16 elite teams will compete in the championship bracket. All games broadcasted on Game Changer and select games on CBS Sports Network. This will be played at Cooperstown All-Star Village. Dick's is the presenting sponsor, and there will be activations and partnerships with Under Armour and experiences provided by Fanatics. We wrote about the partnership between Dick's, that's a strategic one, Unrivaled and UA back in April. There will be a Road to Ripken content series, and Dick's will have a post-game press room. A little note at the end of the release, the 2027 tournament will be expanded to include 11 U teams at Rocker B Ranch and 12 U teams at Cooperstown All-Star Village. Seems like they're coming after Little League World Series, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this came on the heel. I mean, they announced this was going to be a thing last October, I want to say, not to be confused with the kind of Ripken Nationals, Babe Ruth League Championship, which I think last year aired counter to the Little League World Series on like CNBC or NBC network families. It holds still that you're going to have to get off CBS Sports Network. I know it's on Game Changer, right? Long-winded way of saying, I think James mentioned it, and it makes sense that, like, hey, the Little League World Series has a grip because, A, it's hard to fight that brand cachet that it's spent decades, got 50-plus years building up. The partnership with ABC and ESPN, these things are still really important, though, when you're getting top-of-funnel awareness, right? The reason, I would say normies, right, but like just regular old people tune into it as a television event they want to watch. They may not be into youth baseball, but they know it's a good, premium, exciting event. A lot of that has to do with the way ESPN and ABC throw their full weight into it. Carl Ravitch, sets up shop in Williamsport for 2 weeks, right? John Smoltz, unfortunately, spends more time on our airwaves telling us about how much he knows about the sport of baseball more than you, right? think Smoltz goes up. Maybe not. Maybe not. I guess he's
Smoltz is Fox, but I get what you're saying.
I thought he used to go up there. Maybe I'm wrong. All right. Anyway, I have like PTSD from Smoltz every time I see him. But that matters, right? So I think you can't just, this has been a trope of kind of web native stuff for a long time, but you can't make something kind of this national level event without that giant megaphone that mainstream media still has, right? Those high end 10 out of 10 production value, right? It's this, the ESPN approaches that stuff with the same way they approach Sunday Night Baseball. They actually throw more effort into the Little League World Series. That matters. So I could definitely see a world in which Ripken and Unrivaled begin to chip away at Little League and these more kind of premium for-profit circuits become must-see TV, but I think that's going to take years. Those things will take years to develop, right? And then you need a really strong TV partnership. It's not just ESPN airing a high school football game, right? It's ESPN investing in a high school football series where they have, their top announcers and their full broadcast might, as to use another example. So
I'd be interested to see if you said, I do agree too that this will take years, but if Game Changer could build out something, we talk about Game Changer being a media company all the time, could they build out, they do offer play-by-play currently. I think they're in the infancy stages of that and everything, but would Game Changer be able to, would Game Changer be able to build something out? Because they are doing a lot of content, like UA is a partner on this. Dix is doing the post-game press room. So they are building that content layer around it. And yes, even though ESPN has always been the big dog in the Little League space, they're going to carve their niche out there. Unrivaled I'm talking about. And I'm wondering if maybe they can capture more of that digital native audience. And then on, the back end in the future, people more remember maybe watching through Game Changer than they do watching on a linear platform like ESPN.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think but this has been something you still need that top down demand generation to get something to be a premium national event, right? I think everyone would acknowledge the Little League World Series has become a premium national event, 3:00 ABC final. I mean, it's hard I know most people don't watch network TV and stuff like that, but you're going to get fans who are going to watch. Game Changer does a great job. Their announcer, it's an automated voice, single out, right? Single to left field, right? That works when it's your 8-year-old kid's baseball game and there's no possible way to have Sean McDonough there calling it, right? But for these, premium TV events, you expect the same fit and finish that you see with professional sports. So my point is, yes, it's great distribution. People who have Game Changer will open the app, they'll see it. It's a great way to reach people, but say what you want about mainstream media. I'm the world's least defender of mainstream media. That demand they can generate and create events, and it's not just through linear TV. Their distribution, the production value, it all matters. It all matters. There's a reason why leagues, the NFL in particular, is only slowly. If anyone can do it, it's the NFL. They're only slowly doling out rights to streaming providers, right? Little by little. Major League Baseball or ESPN or MLB gave Apple TV Friday nights, right? They gave NBC, they give Roku Sunday at 11 a.m., right? You still need something to make these things feel like events. And so even the biggest leagues on earth are careful about. The NFL isn't like, oh yeah, we're going to put all of our streams in such and such app and everyone will just download it because it's football, right? No, they would lose audience, right? You actually have to be on these huge megaphones to become these national events, I think, right? So I'm not dumping on this at all, right? You could feel where Ripken and Unrivaled are building towards something that could rival Little League. But my point is it's many evolutions past also streaming on Game Changer and the CBS Sports Network, right? It's, the natural evolution of this is Joe Davis is calling the final on Fox, right? That now, oh, cool, right? And guess who's there? John Smoltz.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if I got lost in translation. I was talking about Game Changer building out where they're freelancing with a Greg Olson or something like that calling baseball, or a Joe Davis calling baseball or something like that. That's what I was more talking about, not this automated, stuff that you're getting at your AU game. So I don't know. I agree with you. It's a ways away if they're even thinking about that. I'm surprised that Unrivaled even put Elite in the press release, because they have been pretty adamant about not wanting to be in these elite showcases or these elite tournaments and everything. So I was surprised by that. They want to be in this mass participation events where they're offering premium experiences. And that might be just it. This might just be a nice little tentpole event to capture some clicks and some eyeballs in the summertime.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think doing it over 4th of July weekend, it's kind of a dead time. I've always thought the MLB should do like a mid-season, like the NBA does the in-season tournament. I always thought the MLB should do an in-season tournament that concludes over 4th of July, like from 4th of July weekend through the All-Star game. And it culminates with the All-Star game, and 2 teams like get guaranteed playoff seeding if you win the tournament, right? It's a long season. So I think doing something over 4th of July is a win. Yeah, so it's cool. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, this is one of those, you put Unrivaled and Ripken alongside Dick's and Under Armour as brands that have the power to build out a mainstream youth sports media property, is maybe a good way to put a bow on it. But my point is, long way to go before you can compete with Little League World Series. It's a gold standard.
Well, you might want to put a bow on the media conversation, but I have a little bit more that I want to talk about. I think they could expand pretty easily internationally. I mean, I was at the flag football tournament in East Bay Wide World of Sports.
Flags wide open.
They had hundreds of international teams there and everything. So I don't know if they want to get international when it comes to the Ripken Nationals, and then kind of be throwing a rock over to Little League World Series' headquarters, and then hey, listen, you see what we're building over here? Also, I love this from Dick's. I love their marketing strategy. They sponsor the Little League World Series softball, so they get the eyeballs on the linear format, and now they're presenting sponsor, or they have their strategic partnership with Unrivaled, so they get the live sports experiences. They get their name all over it, and they continue to extend their foothold in the premier as a premier youth baseball property. I think that's a awesome strategy there.
I mean, Dick's is akin, and I did. Be careful how I say this. The way DraftKings and FanDuel can fund pro sports, right? Dick's can fund youth sports through sponsorship, right? It's just one of those things where when the gambling companies came online, you finally had natural advertisers for sports audiences. It was always just beer brands, mostly overlap with sports fans, right? Truck companies somewhat overlap with football fans. And then gambling came along, and it's no, literally the people watching this game are the potential clients for this, right? Obviously not gambling, but Dick's extends to youth sports and all sports participation in that way. But it's hey, if you're watching youth sports, who is a better sponsor than the single biggest, provider of equipment or seller of equipment and apparel in the U.S. So makes total sense.
One more note, Unrivaled mentioned in the release that former MLB All-Star and Cy Young winner Jake Peavy will be at the tournament as an MLB ambassador. Why I mention this is because we've already seen Unrivaled. They purchased Drew Brees' flag league. I don't think Jake Peavy has a huge club baseball powerhouse. I don't think he has the same name recognition as Drew Brees. I think that's okay to say, but I do say this because I'm wondering if if Unrivaled is looking for kind of the Drew Brees in their baseball network. Mike Trout, I think is a good one to think about. I think that's
Cal Ripken.
I mean, they got to put Cal Ripken as they age out and everything. The Ripken name kind of. I mean, I never watched a Cal Ripken game. I don't know if you were around for Cal Ripken. I don't know if anybody playing in that tournament this year has ever watched a Cal Ripken highlight. So I'm just thinking
that's fair. You're dating me. I saw Cal Ripken play in the '96 All-Star game and multiple games in Baltimore, but I'm older
3
than you.
So. Yeah, so I never watched the Iron Man play. I have all this respect in the world for the Iron Man, but I think the way Unrivaled's going and how well the Drew Brees partnership is going, they're going to want somebody to promote, camps, leagues, and tournaments going forward. And I wonder if they'll take the same strategy with baseball. Just theorizing.
That's fair. I'd say Perfect Games got the leg up and that sort of cultural relevance.
Yeah. Yeah, but Unrivaled is new, and hey, maybe this takes us into our next topic. Maybe they just buy FlexWork because FlexWork just bought ProCamps and an 8-figure deal. FlexWork for anyone that doesn't know, they operate camps put on by pro athletes. They just acquired their rival pro camps in an 8-figure deal, according to SBJ. They'll be able to double their events to more than 1,000 annually. And the deal also included ProCamps' G3 marketing and will now let FlexWork expand into new verticals such as activations and meet and greets. What do you think about this news?
So I think trend watch alert here, right? So we had Nina on from the Savannah Bananas and talked about how for them to do their camps right, they really wanted the Bananas and their ecosystem players at these events. They're additive to them. And now you see ProCamps and FlexWork.
It's tough. It's FlexWork. I've said FlexWorks 10 times today.
Yeah. What is FlexWorks? That's another business, right?
I think it's the one where the guy
company.
I don't know. I thought it was the one where the guy slaps the thing on the water thing. It's an infomercial. Flex Seal. No, I'm thinking of Flex Seal.
No, you're thinking of FlexWorks. I don't know. FlexWork. What's the shipping? It doesn't matter. FlexWork and ProCamps. ProCamps. I'm getting screwed up. These are two more brands, by the way, that I think are double capital, no space in between them, right? It's a scourge. It's a scourge. You know, I know on Wednesday we're going to talk about the congressional hearing, right? And maybe a mild involvement on the buying Sandlot side, but like a real missed opportunity here to fight the scourge of double capital letter, no space in between. That should be that. Forget about private equity, ban that, and then work backwards. Right? Everyone's got it. But I think there's a real I don't know. It's a trend. It's been going on for a long time, but around these experiences, my kids are doing a thing this week with the Sixers camp, right? Which is run by a third party. Shout out ESF camps, right? Where you work with teams or players, and then they have some involvement in the camp. Somebody else runs it, but you have the celebrity show up. It checks a lot of the boxes for what everyone wants out of youth sports participation, right? These camps by themselves aren't really elite. I think a lot of times these athletes aren't like that involved in the coaching aspect of it, right? They show up, they sign autographs, they add to the experience. Maybe they get a meet and greet, a photo, all that stuff, a jersey if it's involved with the team. But at the end of the day, it's run by a third party, but it's additive, right? So they could charge a little bit of a premium price, so you would have your detractors there. But generally, these things are pretty accessible, and it's a good experience for kids, and it excites kids, and it brings more kids into the fold. If you're going to a tournament where who's one of the athletes, one of the basketball players, Cooper DeJean, right? You're a kid, Cooper DeJean's going, better chance you're going to enroll. These things have been around for a long time. It's always been a good way for coaches and players to make money during and after their careers. So I think you're going to continue to see, I think, momentum around experiences in sports in general, and by extension, youth sports. Tying that back to Unrivaled, they're in a great spot. They're not just looking to bring in the most competitive kids. Yes, that's part of it, but they want to give these kids an amazing experience when they go down to Aberdeen, Maryland, right? You can make a Disney World comparison there, right? It's a premium price point, but they'll tell you a premium experience. And I think you could extend that to the camp and the local leagues. And what the Bananas are doing is, how can we make these things fun experiences where people will pay for, and athletes and teams will be involved? So I don't have a great take there. It just seems like that is sort of the counterweight to, your kid plays soccer 6 days a week, 10 months a year, right? It's a way to open up, get more kids involved in sports. And, if you can control the costs in the right way, and then I think you would have detractors say, well, it's inherently going to be more expensive if you have an athlete involved, right? Somebody's got to get a cut out of that, and the athlete's got to get a cut. I get it. But all these price points are usually in the hundreds of dollars for roughly a week, right? So it's not outrageous.
I think we pushed back on Friday about, I think Nina said on our interview that they would want, if they did start a youth league, they would want players at every single game, which is probably not something you can scale. So I would think like maybe a FlexWork here with the relationships and everything. I know this is probably too broad because it's the Bananas versus like a pro athlete that's making millions and millions and millions of bucks. But it's just an interesting thing to theorize on, an interesting caveat to really.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always hard to scale attendance by someone who's notable, right? There's only so many people. So it's hard to scale these things. I actually think the bigger experiential unlock is in facilities and infrastructure. How many pro stadiums sit? And I know there's hurdles to this. I've talked to people and like they've explained the hurdles, but you can. What's cooler than playing at the Aberdeen version of Camden Yards is playing at actual Camden Yards, right? Now, granted, all these stadiums have figured out you can do concerts and make millions of dollars by doing concerts, and they don't care if they turf the outfield long because the team made $2 million to host Morgan Wallen while the team's on a 10-day road trip in August, right? But God forbid they let 12-year-olds step on the infield dirt, right? You can't mess up the field. There's not as much money coming with the 12-year-olds. But I do see a world in which I think pro leagues, teams, federations, things we've talked about in our second half trends become more involved, not just in licensing their name or an athlete showing up for a day, but they actually become more involved in the partnership, in the programming of whether it's camps or tournaments or leagues, right? The same way the Bananas want it. The Bananas want to run their league. They don't just want to license it to somebody. Now, there's a balance there. You can't do it all alone, but I think you're going to see the leagues want to be more involved in controlling that experience, and they can leverage their existing facilities. They can leverage their athletes and do it in a more systematic way rather than, it's just like a third-party platform that contracts with an athlete to show up for a camp for a day, right?
So kind of like when the Golden Batter at the Savannah Bananas game comes out, everybody goes nuts because usually it's a legend or it's a certain NFL player in that town. Is that kind of what you're talking about, licensing wise, and maybe getting someone to show up rather than they're having Coach Rack show up to Indianapolis and paying for a flight and paying for all the hotel and lodging?
No, I mean, RCX kind of said this, RCX licenses the league, the league stuff down to the teams, and they do a good job of it. But they didn't really the leagues aren't crafting the programming, right? It's not really a developmental thing, right? It's a fan development thing. Fine, right? In this case, ProCamps and FlexWork, it's one-off athletes coming, showing up. Cooper DeJean runs a camp. It's a third party that hosts it. That athlete gets a cut. You can't really scale that. I think you're going to see teams and leagues in particular and federations be more involved with these things beyond just the licensing, beyond just a one-off athlete showing up, right? How can they help actually craft part of the experience and use all of the resources that they have, from their facilities to their athletes to their access, to really make these comprehensive experiences? Now, they might come at a premium price, and some people aren't going to like that. But I think we as a society are just scratching the surface of kind of sports adjacent experiences, from sports travel at the pro level, certainly at the youth level, tourism drives things. I think you're going to see the major brands in sports, which are ultimately teams, really become more involved, not just in licensing the name or a one-off athlete, actually helping to build a cohesive experience. I don't know what the end state of that looks like, but there's just so much opportunity there that I think is sitting, just completely green space. No one's tapped into it yet. No one's figured out how to tap into it.
I like the vision, pro player X shows up to Cooperstown Dreams Park, as an experience or something like that. I like where
deeper.
What's deeper? School me.
The New York Yankees, New York Rec League, right? And the championship game gets played at Yankee Stadium, right? Why aren't we playing more youth games at pro sports stadiums, right? I'm sure it has to do with cost. You go occasionally, you get a Mites on Ice at a hockey game, right? You get some high school team that is able to play. There's the Carpenter Cup in Philly. So it exists, but these things are sitting empty most of the time. They're sitting empty most of the time. How are you? There's got to be a better way to leverage the facilities and the access. And we are just scratching the surface of sports as sports as Disney World. You don't just go to the game. This sports brand, when the stadium's empty, you got kids, you got youth leagues playing in it. I'm telling you, it's not just about athletes showing up. I think we're just in the early innings here.
I don't know how many field directors of the field, directors of keeping fields for MLB. I forget the title off the top of my head. They're probably the groundskeeper. There you go. They're probably having a conniption, and I hope they're not listening to this while they're driving, because they probably just drove up the side of the road hearing you try to pitch youth leagues getting in to stadiums for tournaments and stuff. I mean, I think you already have proven your point why it doesn't. Why Noah Khan was at Citizens Bank Park this weekend, because they just saw 2, 3, 4 millions and millions of dollars, and the outfield grass will now be crushed for the entirety of the summer. But like they don't. I mean, I go down to a walk down at Citizens Bank Park. You touch the grass, you might get handcuffed.
No,
like,
I know.
You're only allowed to be on the dirt.
I know.
It's crazy.
I know.
I don't think.
I get it.
I think I like where your head's at, and I think more of like, and I know this is a little more distinct towards us, but like in FDR Park, which is across the street from the Citizens Bank Park, there's a Phillies donated field out there that they maintain, they represent. It's got Phillies insignia ever. I think those kind of spaces would be better built out, like a youth sports facility, add on, hook on. You know, there's so much space down where the Phillies play and stuff that I feel like there's two fields that absolutely are run down and suck 2 blocks away from the park and everything that I think if you wanted to, you build on top of there.
And baseball is probably the example. Baseball is probably the most particular about their field, right?
Mm-hmm. True.
But
ice, maybe.
Ice, you know, again, you're now having individualized basketball arenas in some places, right? So there's not as much changeover. At a multi-purpose arena, there's almost an event every day. You almost can't do this, right? But at the basketball standalone arenas, right, probably a little bit more empty court time, I would imagine, right? There's people who know this space better than we do. I'm not just talking about using the fields. I'm talking about teams and leagues being more involved with youth programming and using every brand touch point they have. They're going to need, I'm telling you, pro teams are going to need to think more about revenue streams, because this current round of TV contracts is probably like the high water mark, or the growth rates have slowed, right? Cable carriage fees, this is well documented. We're getting out of youth a little bit here, but they're going to need to think about other revenue lines. These are multi-billion-dollar brands, and they've really only operated under a couple of paradigms. And this is already happening. You're already seeing teams think about how to extract more money out of customers. John Wall Street does a great job of covering all this stuff, right? Like, how do teams really extract more money? How do they market? How do they know their fan? They're not really reaching. Most of the reach down in the youth from pro teams and leagues generally been in like the philanthropic model, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, we built this community field. We did this. That's great. But it's not the business model. These are for-profit entities, right? How can we leverage all of the access we have, the fields we have that, you know, every kid in your city would die to get on, right? How can we leverage our IP beyond just working with RCX and allowing them, you know, to license it to somebody? I do think a world, we were going to ask this of RCX, you know, but like, they're not policing, you know, MLB isn't policing little league teams that have national league teams, right?
They're not.
But the bananas are probably a world in which pro leagues start doing that, right? These are real, you know, these are real brands, and there's a balance there between there's a balance between the feel good side and the business side, but this is meaningful IP.
You talked about the other day where it's like NBA and NHL, they let fans share their highlights and everything, which it was obviously a video copyright strike. You'll see now that a lot of times if you're especially the NFL, if you're sharing video highlights and it doesn't come from the NFL account, a lot of time you'll get DCMA the next day or 48 hours from now, and you'll get a strike against your account and stuff. So I see where your head's at.
It's a balance. They don't want to police that, but I think you're going to realize, like, well, shoot, let's figure out a way to like leverage our IP in a meaningful way. RCX, I think, is, you know, this is why they're in such a good spot, right? They're the tip of the spear, licensing NHL Street and NFL. NFL Flag's probably done it in the most systematic way, right? But it's still, it's kind of the end of the day a license, right? RCX runs the program, local operators run it, but the NFL, you know, gets their license across. I think there's a route there for the teams to think about extracting a lot more dollars. And they, Austin and Eisel said it in our interview. They think about themselves like the way Fanatics is with sports apparel, where everything in sports apparel runs through Fanatics. It's not just licensing. You know, there's deep integration there. They run the team stores. There's a lot more pro and federations and leagues and teams can do to get involved with how their brand is deployed to youth sports participation in general. Licensing flag football uniforms is just a start. That's kind of my point. It's a money-making opportunity, and I think it's a development opportunity, at least on the federation side.
Yeah, with TV deals and the RSNs, and especially in baseball, coming to we don't know what they're going to look like in 2 to 3 years.
What did we just read? The Phillies launching their own potential TV network, right? Their deal with Comcast, which a multi-billion-dollar deal is going to be up. That's the stuff that was funding the crazy baseball contracts, as an example.
Yeah.
You're going to see that rear its ugly head in the CBA, and teams, you're already seeing it, right? We see it here. Again, we keep going to the Philly because it's what we know so well, but like John Middleton, who owns the Phillies, has covered Citizens Bank Park in advertising over the past 3 years. Covered. Like, there is not an inch, and it's fine. Like, it's a business. Fans complain. At the end of the day, really, who cares? But he's like, we got to get revenue somewhere. And you're going to see this $80 billion youth sports industry and kids running around with knockoff jerseys, right? You're not controlling right? Like, how can we get our hands in that, right? We have the most important brands in sports and generally barely touch youth sports.
I agree. I think camps. I like camps. I think camps
tournaments.
I think you could sell the Phils using their stadium on camps, as long as it's mass participation where they know they can get a bunch of money. I think that's
they do them through our friends at ESF. They do them, right?
Yeah,
they do. But
not on the field.
What's that?
On the field?
There is not on the field, but there is a behind the scenes tour of the ballpark involved with their camps, right?
I do like those.
Our friends at ESF, RCX, right? Three letter. By the way, this is the three letter acronym area of youth sports, right?
Yeah.
RCX and ESF. Yes, they're leveraging some of that. It's a good example, right? They go down, they get behind the scenes tours, they get Philly stuff. Former players show up 1 or 2 days. Again, I think you're just scratching the surface. That's just the low hanging fruit. Oh yeah, we can give these kids a tour at 2:00, right? What's the next part of that, right? Kids get to accompany the players on the field, right? They get to walk out like the FIFA guys, right? Look at the way F1 does stuff, right? Think about how they're commercializing every aspect of what they do. When I hear your groundskeeper argument, I think about the argument that players and coaches don't want more access. It's their sanctity. Our locker rooms, our sacred space, right? Have you ever seen an F1 paddock before the race? It's all celebrities. It's intentionally celebrities, and the guy walking through interviewing celebrities. And, you got like Russell Crowe standing next to Kimi Antonelli 3 seconds before he drives 200 miles an hour and risks his life, right? If those guys can be surrounded by chaos and then refocus, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that a basketball player can't, be around. Maybe that's a bad example. There's a lot of celebrities around.
This is a really good example, because I was watching the race yesterday, and after they're done, they go into this little room and they all talk, and they have microphones all over the place. And these guys don't get a moment of privacy from the time they get to the track to the time they leave the track. It's absolutely crazy. The American mind cannot comprehend it.
They've executed the WWE-ization of racing. It's perfect. You're right. From the minute they get there, they're part of the show. And these guys are genuinely risking their lives. So if they can figure out a way to do that, every other athlete can't complain. And we see it happening already. But I think, again, that's where you can leverage youth, the access, right? You can make your youth leagues have, certain access. If a team wins the tournament, they get to, sit in the dugout or batting practice. Like, I know this stuff happens in fits and starts, but again, when I hear the groundskeeper argument sounds like the access argument too. Oh, it would be too distracting to players. Oh, it would screw up the grass. I think you can find a way. We could find a way to get little kid cleat marks out of the dirt. We can figure it out.
And then it also goes back to your one that you always bring up, who's sponsoring Phillies 8U? Is it Wawa? Is it Turkey Hill? Is it, Chop or something like that? Is it the Chop League brought to you by, the Phillies? It'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everyone gets Phillies jerseys and they're all sponsored by Chop.
Yeah. So
So here's a big one the last couple of years. The driving range at stadiums all over the country. I forget the name of the company, but they go around all these stadiums Because why? Why are people willing to pay more for that? You're hitting a golf ball because you're hitting a golf ball in your favorite stadium, right?
Yes.
This isn't rocket science.
Sleeping over, they do the sleepovers at the stadium now and stuff.
Right. Everyone's thinking about this. I hate keep using the just scratching the surface term, but like we're early days on this stuff. Early days. And the biggest unlock there is every city's got 500,000 kids who want to be in that, find a way into that ecosystem, and parents will pay their way into that ecosystem.
This is definitely because you just spent two straight games at the link for the World Cup. Does that have anything to do with it?
It does. My grand theory of everything here is that I was looking, the sports tourism market's couple $100 billion total, inclusive of youth globally. But it's projected to grow to like 1.5 trillion over the next like 5 to 7 years. Damn. So like we thought youth sports was big. Global sports tourism is on another level. And I saw a little bit of what their, On Location is doing around hospitality and stuff. As you're seeing leagues realize they're sitting on some IP that hasn't been monetized the way probably it could be. And especially with, TV contracts, like they're thinking about how can we extract every dollar. I think we're just scratching the surface of that world, right? If the sports tourism industry is going to grow 5x to a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace, the experiences that are going to be created around sports, and people aren't going to like it. It's going to price a lot of people out, but it's where we're headed. And then what is the youth component of that, right? How do you tie in the premium brand experience around sports to sports participation? Massive, massive, massive thing. So it's just one long ecosystem. I still think we should get rid of the draft. We should have a draft exception. If someone, that would incentivize every team in America, every pro league to do what the MLS does and invest in homegrown talent. Because if they develop that guy, they don't run the risk of him entering the draft. That's why it's all philanthropic. You build a team, but if a kid Mike Trout goes and plays for the Angels here, right? If he came through the Phillies feeder system, he's a Philly for life, right?
Yeah. No, I like it. I mean, the competition of play in the MLB is, I think the MLB would be the salary thresholds that some of these teams are spending on, and the competition. This is the reason why we're kind of heading towards a salary cap, or what they want to head towards a salary cap in the MLB and stuff. But you led me into my next point that I wanted to make, and we'll touch on this pretty quickly. FlexWork, who we were talking about originally, who bought ProCamps, they are owned by Atro Capital. Atro Capital, a PE firm. They acquired FlexWork last year. I was interested. I thought it was interesting to see that there was no mention of like access or affordability in the SBJ article that this was coming from, because with the Let Kids Play Act and the unfairly or fairly criticizing from Capitol Hill, and all we talk about in the interview is the marketing company you purchase that'll be able to get you more meet and greets and brand activations and stuff. I just thought it's an interesting move after we saw RCX and BVG, and Eli goes on CNBC and he's like affordability, accessibility, and that was the name of the game. And then Catherine Van Dyke called out Base Sports Group after they partnered with Elite Sports Tournaments last week. I just thought it was interesting, and I thought the playbook was going to be from, like, especially PR firms that are PE backed, the playbook was going to be like, hey, make sure we're on the ball with the messaging and everything. And I haven't seen anything else from FlexWork. The only thing I saw was the SBJ article, and I thought I did enough research to try to find a statement or anything else. So this is what I'm going off of. Just interested to hear your thoughts on that, now that every single PR statement and every single acquisition is being scrutinized by Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think youth sports PR playbook 101 now just needs to have, everyone should have a publicist, especially if you're taking investment, and making sure you're overtly leading the horse to water about how your investment is going to improve accessibility and affordability, right? Just straight industry advice. We're seeing it. The conversation taking place at Capitol Hill is not really including anyone in the industry yet. And I suspect there's lots of areas of the industry that are kind of intentionally don't want to talk about the level of investment. But if you're not, guess who is tomorrow, right? Katie Van Dyke and Linda Flanagan, right? They're in front of Capitol Hill tomorrow.
Guess what NBC News Nightly just did this week? They had the same 2-minute thing that we've seen in the mainstream media. They had the Project Play stats. They had the same youth sports is over, isn't affordable. And that's the narrative that 99% of your customers are getting, because they're not, unless it's us, they're not getting a narrative from anybody else.
I joked like 6 months ago that we should be like the PR people for the industry, and like, here we are. Right?
Yeah.
No one's doing it. I see the lineup as people speaking. I'm like, man, somebody from the industry pick up the shield and get out there, right? But yeah, to your point about this deal, it shouldn't have had to been Jordan Love who said, brands want to have an impact. If Nike can send gift bags or some stuff that kids can walk away with, if you're doing good work in the community for kids, they want to try and help, right? That's about as soft as an example. Oh, Nike sent some gift bags, right?
Yeah.
I think you got to do a little bit better on just messaging when you do consolidate things, as to how it could expand access, right? You got to think about, you should actually do it, right? And then to the extent you're doing it, talk about it, right? And if you're not doing it, then, you should think about how you should do it.
We talk about sponsorship all the time. It's like, hey, you can do sponsorship, but like, how are you subsidizing these costs? You got to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk.
It's right here, right? It could be more brand-led meet and greet opportunities. Somebody explain why if Nike shows up and does a brand-led meet and greet, that they can subsidize even 5% of the participation for that camp, right? Why it's 5% cheaper because Nike's there. It's such an easy win, right? And again, I'm not telling people to lie, right? But if your camp costs $100, right? You could say, hey, without Nike, we're charging $105, right? You're setting your own price. Like, you can, again, you should be honest about this, and you should subsidize costs, but like, there's not a high threshold to clear here, high bar to clear, to explain to people why sponsorship can actually decrease costs.
Yeah. So still got some learning to do on the, we're maturing as an industry. We're all maturing at the same time. It's getting under scrutiny at the same time. We're trying to figure it out, peel back the layers and piece it all together at the same exact time.
And listen, first time it's ever come out of my lips here, right? In my statement to Congress today, I wrote, some scaled operators build premium elective experiences at high quality facilities. They can be expensive and should be scrutinized when pricing, contracts, lodging, or market power harm families. But their existence alone does not explain low income participation challenges, especially when participation occurs outside of these elite club settings. My point being is that youth sports doesn't have to be an either or, right? I think a lot of people in the industry are afraid or worried, or there's hand wringing publicly that the existence of the high end expensive stuff that some families can pay for is disqualifying to the low end. Those things can coexist. They can coexist. You can have lower end participation that is subsidized, that is high quality, right? And doesn't disqualify someone who's really talented from, doesn't limit their ability to become a pro someday just because they don't have money to go to fancy tournaments. On the flip side, you can have really cool experiences that just some subset of families aren't going to be able to pay for, right? Those things can coexist. Some families are going to spend $500 to go to Jordan Love's camp. Other families can't afford it. That kid should have an alternative though, right? It's, I think the narrative has been framed as an either or, right? Because one exists, the other no longer exists. First of all, data doesn't fully support that. But like, I think the conversation is like, how do we make sure both of these things exist, somewhat equally?
100%. 100%. I can't believe the words, my message to Congress just came out of your mouth. It's crazy.
Wasn't on the bingo card for 26.
Yeah.
Wasn't on the bingo card.
We'll finish up with this interesting quote that came out of Cons. If anybody listened to the Friday episode where we talked about streaming and data rights, this came from Yonder's founder. Yonder is the phone locking pouch company. If you've been to maybe a comedy show in the last year or two, you've seen this. He said, kids are afraid of being filmed and recorded at any point, anywhere, all the time. It's absolutely insane that people can be filmed, documented, and broadcast online anywhere all the time. If you think about that through the lens of social psychology, there's a reason they're so anxious, and that's a big part of it. Now, this was a conversation on a panel at Cons focused around more of like social media and what it's doing to more Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all that. But it kind of proves, it kind of lends to your point about streaming rights and data rights that we talked about on Friday being like once we kind of sift through the Let Kids Play Act and private equity, streaming is going to be the next one on the menu. I think it's easy to assume that.
I think it's going to be part of the conversation, right around data rights. John, shout out John Sewer from Fast Break. I'm not touching that, right?
Yeah.
State by state patchwork of laws. Yeah, I think we mentioned this last show, right? Just more with the Perfect Game stuff, where they kind of hey, we have the rights to this, and they approached it in a constructive way. But some story's going to pop up where some kid was filmed on the field. It happened in the live barn thing where their cameras were always on during camps. The thing is, I have no life. I read the T's and C's of like all the streamers and tech platforms and cameras. A little bit of AI helped to parse through it, but like I read the salient sections of a good chunk of them. And a lot of the ones that are kind of parent-led say, hey, you own the copyright, but you're acknowledging that you've gotten the consent of everybody at that field that you're going to film, right? Well, when I go to my kid's soccer game and there's 3 cameras on a stick, right? No one's come and asked me if they can film my kid playing sports, right? Now, I think 99.9% of the time, no one cares, right? But I got 3 cameras filming my kid, right? And lots of kids do, right? I think the education and standardization of those things will have to just be part of the conversation as it becomes more and more prevalent. Because what's going to if it doesn't, what you're going to happen is an ugly incident. Something is captured it shouldn't be, and ends up somewhere in some precarious situation or God knows what, and it's used in a scary way or a lewd way. Like you just don't know, right? Like something, and someone is surprised to learn that either by attending your event, they implicitly, signed such and such T&C, or some parent who's otherwise well-meaning and just thought they're bringing the camera to the field didn't realize that they were signing. One of the things they were signing up to was that they had obtained consent for everybody. The platforms, in some cases, pass off that consent to the user. So I'm well-meaning dad. I put a camera on a stick. Camera catches something. Somebody uses it in a way they shouldn't. You as a user now have liability, right? And I think there's a lot of stuff in the T's and C's that pass the liability of the data, whether it's video or other data, onto the users, the parents of that platform, who are just needing to use the platform to exist. It's going to be an interesting part of the conversation. That data should exist. Tech should exist. Streaming should exist. It does a lot of good. Most people want it. My kid loves watching it. It's game changer highlights. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of tech. The soccer highlights are great, but everyone reads the T's and C's. Each one's got a different caveat for who owns that right and who's responsible for collecting what consent. It's messy.
It'll be interesting to follow along. But hey, that's the end of the episode. We appreciate everybody who's listening through now. We'll talk to you on Wednesday. GG's.
Good game.